Hello everyone, and welcome to another beer review. Now, we're back onto something a bit interesting, and we've covered two options of I call the draft. So we've covered Guinness Draught, and we've also covered the kind of Draft Zero. So we have, and I've made my kind of feelings known that I find that the kind of general Guinness Stout quite bland as a stout. Now I'm sure a lot of people might agree with me, and I'm sure a lot of people don't agree with me, but I just find that it's just lacking in body and kind of intensity of flavour. It's an easy drinking stout, so it is, and it's designed to be an easy drinking stout. In fact, it's a good way to describe it's a stout for basically people who are just trying stout, really. It's not really designed for stout drinkers, it's more kind of designed for people who are not really kind of stout drinkers or want something the kind of best of both worlds, want a kind of some stout flavours but also want that kind of sessionability of a kind of a dark ale or something like that. So it's a kind of a cross between the two, and then of course you've got the gimmicks of the nitrogen pour and all this type of stuff. But we've got the original today, the original Guinness. Is it called it Extra Stout, isn't it? Yeah, they still call it Extra Stout. Just kind of check on that. Now the thing was though, when I used to basically go drinking in Ireland, because I used to work over there quite a lot, the problem is though, you used to get long bottles, not these kind of fat 500ml bottles. You used to get long bottles just with a red cap, and a lot of times is a case of there wouldn't be a label on it, it would just be embossed on the actual bottle itself, these kind of dark brown bottles, and you've like nondescript. So this is original, and apparently it's the Extra Stout, and it's dark and lively, apparently, dark and lively. Just what every woman wants, dark and lively. Now this is 4.2%, which I think is roughly the same as the kind of the draft kind of can nonsense, and of course it's a 500ml bottle, and yes, it's under £2 a bottle, so it's within the sweet spot. So let's crack it open, and let's see how it's like. Now, this should pour like a normal stout. No creamy heads, no let's put a shamrock in it nonsense, you know, that type of stuff, all the kind of gimmicky bollocks. And even then I've still made an arse of it. It's quite, well, lively, it did say on the bottle, dark and lively. Well, it is a bit, oh, lively. Right, now it's been recommended to me to try the kind of Jamaican, kind of Trinidad versions of it, which I remember rightly, I think it's to do with molasses sugar cane that's used and that type of stuff. That's why it's kind of classed as the kind of the Jamaican or the West Indian versions. So I'll try and get a hold of that. I should be able to get a hold of that somewhere. When I'm out and about, I'll keep looking for it, and I will do a review of that as well, because that is a slightly different beast as well. And a lot of people prefer the kind of the West Indian kind of versions, the West Indian versions, or the West Indies. There we go, if you're into cricket. So let's finally get this poured. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Ooh. Right, just let you have a look at that. So it's still got the tanned head, but again it's more like a normal beer. It doesn't have that kind of thick, kind of gloopy, you know, head on it, like basically whipped egg whites. So there you go. So it smells. Not getting that much. Again, I've always found with Guinness you don't really get that much aroma off it. It's kind of lacking in aromas. You're getting a little bit of kind of molasses smell, a little bit of kind of dark malts, but it's very, very light. I mean, you really have to go searching for it. Really, blinking you'd miss it. So let's see what it tastes like. Right. Well, it's not like the stuff that the flat cat brigade used to drink. The old flat, it's not easy to say, the old flat cap brigade in Dublin and things like that, because it was quite flat. That beer that they used to drink, the Guinness they used to drink, and yes, it just basically was a brown bottle. There was no label on it, it was just an embossed bottle, just saying Guinness, blah blah blah, and just a red cap. There was no label on it at all, and what I have noticed is drinking this is there's a lot more carbonation. In fact, for a stout, excuse me, Jesus, it is a bit overcarbonated. That's the first thing I noticed in the mouthfeel, is like, this has got too much carbonation. Yeah. Flavours, again a bit light, just lacking intensity. The stout flavours are there, but it's like, woo, it's like dialed down. And you're thinking, what have you done? Have you watered it down or something? I mean, well, yeah, the flavours are there, and trust me, coming out of the fermenter, the flavours are probably a lot stronger. What's going on? Are you brewing a stronger beer and then diluting it? Well, what the hell's going on? It's like, oh, excuse me, oh, it is very gassy. And for a stout, it just really shouldn't be, excuse me, that bloody gassy. Jesus God. Oh, that's almost, it really is, it's almost soft drink levels. I mean, to be totally honest, if you had that level of carbonation in a lager, it'd be way too much. And you expect a lager to be slightly more carbonated than definitely a stout or a porter. You know, usually the normal process is the lighter the beers, you have more carbonation, and as you go in towards the darker beers, the carbonation drops and drops and drops. And of course, especially in kind of English beers, the traditional English beers, well, especially from casks, there was no carbonation at all really, it was flat as a witch's tit. From that point of view, it was always a kind of dark stuff. You know, the darker beers, the darker ales, always had less carbonation or no carbonation at all. This is just, really is very strange. And it spoils it. The mouthfeel is not nice. Not nice. It's attacking the front of the tongue, just the tip of the tongue. The minute you take it, boom, it's like, right on the front of the tongue, you're thinking, oh, that's not right. And then you can feel it down the sides of the mouth as well, as you're basically just kind of holding it in the mouth just to try and pick up the flavours. It's just ripping past the gums here and the inside of the mouth, and you're thinking, no, that's a bollock. Seriously, somebody's dropped a bollock there on that one. And I don't think that's, I mean, they might have done it intentionally, but for what bloody reason, I honestly don't know. And because of that, they're not really picking up the flavours. The flavours of the stout are very light. I mean, the added kind of over carbonation. I mean, let's be totally honest. When you add CO2 to a drink, and especially if you add too much of it, one, it obviously changes the mouthfeel quite dramatically. But two, carbon dioxide does impart accent flavours. And if you do it too much, then these accent flavours can obviously affect subtle flavours. And then the problem is with Guinness, a lot of the stout flavours are quite subtle. So by over-carbonating it, you're kind of degrading what's there as the stout flavours to a certain degree. I'll be totally honest, it has a homebrew feel about it, it really does. It has that kind of, you know, now maybe you don't, but some people do, some people don't. But one of the major things is when you're doing homebrew is is getting the kind of levels right. If you're doing bottle carbonation or things like that, you're putting in, I mean, you're putting in your measured sugar for your secondary kind of fermentation and your kind of conditioning and things like that. And there's lots of little things that can go wrong. Sometimes your yeast is basically fermenting at too high a temperature and you're stressing it, or you've cold crashed it and it's been on for too long. There's all these different little bits, but the problem is it's all to do with fine tuning. I mean, one of the major things is like when you're doing home brewing is start off with the beer and don't try a different beer until you've got that beer sitting where you want it. If you can keep producing that beer time and again to that kind of level or standard that you're happy with, then move on to something different. But you've got to keep fine tuning and adjusting it until you get it with your kit, because remember, it's not just the ingredients, it's also the kit you're working with and also different times of the year. And this is another thing that people don't realise is you can spend a lot of money buying kit with homebrew to try and emulate different kind of temperature scenarios, humidity, everything else. I mean, I'll be totally honest, in the summer, I'm not going to basically think about brewing a lager. Lager's a great drink to drink in the summer, but it's not one for brewing unless you're basically using a cooling coil and all this type of stuff and blah blah blah, and then you know there's so many things you've got to kind of do with it, because again it's a long slow fermenting process, it's a very long conditioning process, and everything has to be temperature controlled, and it's also at a lower temperature than you would have for an ale and things like this. But then of course at winter's not a good time to really for brewing ales unless you're basically brewing them indoors and you're kind of controlling the temperature, because of course if it can be too high you'll have problems, if it's too low you'll have problems. So there's all these type of things you've got to sort out. And then of course once you actually get it in the bottles or your keg or whatever you're going to do, you've got to kind of control and manipulate that to the way you want it. So you not only get the flavours you want, but you get that kind of carbonation and mouthfeel and everything else. And it feels like slightly homebrewish, because like it's, as I've bottled beers in the past, some I've got less carbonation, some I've got a lot more carbonation and things like this. And again, that can also be down to the seals in the bottles and the caps, and depending what type of bottles you're using. Also just depends on, because again if you're distributing beer into bottles, then of course it's not really the same, because some of that beer will have slightly more yeast than others and things like this in the bottle. So when you add the same amount of sugar you think, oh well, I'll get that uniform kind of carbonation. You don't, because the problem is you'll still get some bottles that are slightly less and some are more and everything else, just because there's more yeast in one bottle than the other, just because of how it's distributed when you're basically decanting it into the bottles and all these different types of things. And it feels like that, as if like, oh, this is a kind of over-carbonated bottle. That's what it feels like from a home brew. As for flavour, there isn't really any, to be told honest. It's so light. I mean, there's little accents of stout flavouring, but it's almost like carbonated water with little accents of stout. And I'll be totally honest, it's just as bland as the draft nonsense. To be totally honest though, I would understand that compared to this, I can understand why the draft is probably more popular, because there's a nicer mouthfeel. The flavours aren't, I mean, you expect with the original kind of extra stout you're going to have maybe something better, because you think maybe something's lost with the kind of gimmicky of the kind of Guinness Draught, but unfortunately it's not. It just tastes exactly the same. They're kind of lacking the kind of blandness within the flavours. The only difference is that there's a better mouthfeel and more drinkability with the draft, because it doesn't have the over-carbonation, even though it's got the nonsense widget and everything else. This is just over-carbonated, so it's actually spoiled. So this is actually less pleasant to drink because of that, just because of the mouthfeel is just so off. It's just way off. So it's just absolutely dreadful. It really is. It's one of these ones that crack it open, pour the pint and leave it for 30 minutes, then come back and hope at that point is the case it's kind of calmed down a bit, that makes it a bit more drinkable. Flavour wise, God, it's bland. You're struggling to find flavours, really. Now, I know there's probably plenty of people out there that love Guinness and, you know, it's their favourite tipple and everything else. But I just think it's a waste. I'm trying to rack my brains to think, was it always that bad? I'm talking about the kind of mainstream versions, not the kind of flat cap Irish version that the guys used to drink. And maybe it's my own naivety and everything else, thinking that it wasn't so bad in the past, but it could also be down to basically me thinking, well, lesser experience of drinking different stouts and things like that, and I thought, yeah, well, this is what stout's like, and then obviously as you become more experienced and you try different beers and different stouts, you start to kind of realise, no, Guinness is kind of piss water, really. And yeah, this is just overcarbonated piss water, it really is. So what would I give this out of 10? Well, to be totally honest, with the overcarbonation and everything else, it's actually quite dreadful. So flavour wise, I would probably have given it about a 3 out of 10 because it's just lacking in flavour, it's just very bland. And just little accents to kind of give you a hint that you might be drinking stout, but there's nothing really up front and centre, there's nothing intense or robust about it, it's just kind of watery, lacking body, lacking flavour. But then of course with the overcarbonation it just makes it worse, so it loses another point. So there you go, it's 2 out of 10, it just really is. It's just, for a stout it's an embarrassment. From the overcarbonation, and then of course you get the lack of flavour. And just very disappointing, really. Because there's plenty of breweries within Ireland that can do a far better job than this. And this seems to be the most famous and kind of well-known one, and it really is a bit of an embarrassment for Ireland to a certain degree. So yeah, it's just 2 out of 10. It just, I really couldn't recommend it. It's just an awful mouthfeel, just lacking flavour left, right and centre. It's just, if you want a stout, go and buy anything else. I mean, it's my best. I mean, even go and buy the draft, buy the gimmicky stuff, because it's still the same bland flavour, but at least you've got a better mouthfeel. I mean, so that's what you gain from the kind of the draft can. But if you want more flavour, buy anything that doesn't say Guinness on it at the moment, is probably the best advice. So yeah, 2 out of 10. Thanks for watching. Cheers, and bye for now.